Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg, here today to talk about the Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist, which was announced last night. By the time you see this video, it will be tomorrow for me. So you'll have seen some other reaction videos. I just wanted to kind of get this in because I really like digging through a long list. This seems like a good one by and large. There are titles that I was completely unfamiliar with, some titles that I have been familiar with, and some titles that are on my TBR and that I already own and I'm looking forward to read. So I just kind of wanted to take the time to, go through them and talk to you about them. Now, I'm not really going to go into snubs or anything like that, but significantly, Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellman did not make the shortlist, which to me seems fairly surprising. This, of course, was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. A lot of the feedback I've seen from people who have read the books that were on the shortlist have kind of said that if there were really going to be two winners for the Booker Prize this year, it probably should have been Duck's Newburyport and Girl, Woman, Other. And I really would have liked to see how this one would have done with the Women's Prize and with this judging panel and how it would shake out against these nominees. So I am disappointed that it didn't quite make the list. So there you go. So let's do it. Starting with number one, this is in no order, by the way, How We Disappeared by Jing-Jing Lee. I'm going to be referring to my laptop throughout this whole thing for the descriptions of these books, so please bear with me on that. Singapore, 1942. As Japanese troops sweep down Malaysia and into Singapore, a village is ransacked. Only 3 survivors remain, one of them a tiny child. In a neighboring village, 17-year-old Wang Di is bundled into the back of a troop carrier and shipped off to a Japanese military brothel. In the year 2000, her mind is still haunted by her experiences there, but she has long been silent about her memories of that time. It takes 12-year-old Kevin and the mumbled confession he overhears from his ailing grandmother to set in motion a journey into the unknown to discover the truth. Weaving together 2 timelines and 2 life-changing secrets, How We Disappeared is an evocative, profoundly moving, and utterly dazzling novel heralding the arrival of a new literary star. Sign me up. That sounds really fascinating, very interesting. I had not heard of this book or this author at all. So, but I am going to be looking at my library to see if this book is available because that sounds really interesting. With the exception of Duck's Newburyport, I'm going to avoid speculation about what might have been snubbed or what might make the shortlist since I'm not that familiar with the Women's Prize. But I think this seems like a good candidate to make the shortlist, and I would be interested in seeing how it does there. Book number 2 is Djinn Patrol on the Purple Line by Deepa Anappara. Again, a book I have never heard of, an author I have never heard of either. 9-year-old Jay watches too many reality cop shows. He thinks he's smarter than his friend Pari, even though she always gets top marks, and considers himself to be a better boss than Fayez, even though Fayez is the one with the job. When a boy at school goes missing, Jay decides to use the crime-solving skills he has picked up from episodes of Police Patrol to find him. With Pari and Fayez by his side, Jay ventures into some of the most dangerous parts of the sprawling Indian city, the bazaar at night, and even the railway station at the end of the Purple Line. But kids continue to vanish, and the trio must confront terrified parents, an indifferent police force, and soul-snatching djinns in order to uncover the truth. Oddly, the first book that comes to mind when I read that description is The Curious Case of the Dog in the Nighttime, where a kid is kind of investigating into something which reveals larger things about society. In that respect, it sounds familiar, but obviously this is a little bit more pointedly political, probably. I feel like a lot depends on execution for this one, so I would not run out to pick this one up. I think this is one that I haven't watched any of the other reaction videos to this long list, so this is one that I would be curious to hear reactions of other people to, and I kind of want to hear the conversation around it a little more before I commit either way, because I feel like the execution on this is what would make or break this book. Could be good, could probably be bad. I could see it happening both ways. Then we get to Nightingale Point by Luan Goldie. On an ordinary Saturday morning in 1996, the residents of Nightingale Point wake up to their normal lives and worries. Mary has a secret life that no one knows about, not even Malachi, and Tristan, the brothers she vowed to look after. Malachi had to grow up too quickly. Between looking after Tristan and nursing a broken heart, he feels older than his 21 years. Tristan wishes Malachi would stop pining for Pamela. No wonder he's falling in with the wrong crowd without Malachi keeping him straight. Elvis is trying hard to remember the instructions his care worker gave him, but sometimes he gets confused and forgets things. Pamela wants to run back to Malachi, but her overprotective father has locked her in and there's no way out. It's a day like any other until something extraordinary happens. When the sun sets, Nightingale Point is irrevocably changed, and somehow, through the darkness, the residents must find a way back to lightness and back to each other. I mean, that sounds fine. It doesn't immediately grab me. Certainly not as much as the first one did, and not even as much as the second one did. sounds a little bit familiar, so I would be inclined to kind of pass on this one, but I'm not. It doesn't sound bad enough that I would, or negative enough that I would just inherently write it off. Depending on feedback on it, I could potentially consider revisiting it. If you have feedback on it, I would love to hear it. Drop in the comments down below. Next is one I have heard of. It's actually been recommended to me a couple of times, at least 3 times, in comments on recent videos. It's Actress by Anne Enright, and I believe Anne Enright has won a Booker Prize. Hang on, let me double check. She has. She won the 2007 Booker Prize for The Gathering, which I have not read, but heard good things about at the time. So this is the story of Irish theater legend Catherine Odell as told by her daughter Nora. It tells of early stardom in Hollywood, of highs and lows on the stages of Dublin and London's West End. I'm sold already. Catherine's life is a grand performance with young Nora watching from the wings. But this romance between mother and daughter cannot survive Catherine's past or the world's damage. As Nora uncovers her mother's secrets, she acquires a few of her own. Then fame turns to infamy when Catherine decides to commit a bizarre crime. Actress is about a daughter's search for the truth, the dark secret and the bright star, and what drove Catherine finally mad. Brilliantly capturing the glamour of post-war America and the shabbiness of 1970s Dublin, Actress is an intensely moving, disturbing novel about mothers and daughters and the men in their lives. A scintillating examination of the corrosive nature of celebrity, it is also a sad and triumphant tale of freedom from bad love and from the avid gaze of the crowd. If you follow along at all, you know that I also have a kind of obsession with Oscars and movies and Hollywood history. So this, just from that angle alone and the stage angle, I'm really interested in this. Like I said, it had been recommended a couple of times, but I had not actually seen a plot description. So that really grabs me. By the way, one of my favorite movies is All About Eve, and so this kind of is in my wheelhouse. But it feels like with Dublin in the 70s, that kind of political aspect of it would really raise the interest on it, as well as in addition to the mother and daughter storyline. I may check to see if my library has this once I'm done with my BookTube Prize judging and have a little bit more time, because that sounds amazing. Next is another author I'm familiar with. It's Ann Patchett and The Dutch House. Okay, so I have a complicated history with Ann Patchett. People had always told me to read her, specifically Bel Canto. However, I did not read Bel Canto first. I read a book called Run, and I hated it. I really did not like it. I even thought it was kind of accidentally offensive and, you know, a little bit elitist in an accidental kind of way. And people have always told me, don't judge Ann Patchett based on that book. You know, definitely read Bel Canto, try some of her other books, and I've just never mustered the courage to do it. So that gives you a good idea how I approach The Dutch House, which I've even seen kind of mixed feedback on it on BookTube since it was released. But let's see what the plot is. Danny Conroy grows up in the Dutch House, a lavish mansion. Though his father is distant and his mother is absent, Danny has his beloved sister Maeve. Maeve, with her wall of black hair, her wit, her brilliance, the siblings grow and change as life plays out under the watchful eyes of the house's former owners in the frames of their oil paintings. Then one day, their father brings Andrea home. Though they cannot know it, her arrival to the Dutch House sows the seeds of the defining loss of Danny and Maeve's lives. Told with Ann Patchett's inimitable blend of humor, rage, and heartbreak, The Dutch House is a book for our times, of family, love, loss, and the powerful bonds of place and time that magnetize and repel us for our whole lives. The premise sounds interesting, but the premise of Run sounded interesting to me, and I really got burned by that book, so I'm sticking with my Ann Patchett bias and probably going to pass on that one. Next is Weather by Jenny Offill, and I am, Jenny Offill, by the way, Offill. I always pronounce it awful, but it's Offill. And I am familiar with her because I have read The Department of Speculation and really enjoyed this book, and if you haven't read it, I would recommend it. It is a tiny little novella about a marriage, a family, and given its size, it packs a lot of heft into it. So I have been looking forward to Jenny Offill's Weather, in which Lizzie Benson slid into her job as a librarian without a traditional degree, but this gives her a vantage point from which to practice her other calling as an unofficial shrink. For years, she has supported her God-haunted mother and her recovering addict brother. They have it both stabilized for the moment, but then her old mentor, Sylvia Liller, makes a proposal. Sylvia has become famous for her prescient podcast, Hell and High Water, and wants to hire Lizzie to answer the mail she receives from left-wingers worried about climate change and right-wingers worried about the decline of Western civilization. As she dives into this polarized work, she begins to wonder what it means to keep tending your own garden once you've seen the flames beyond its walls. When her brother becomes a father and Sylvia a recluse, Lizzie is forced to acknowledge the limits of what she can do. But if she can't save others, then what or who might save her? And all the while, the voices of the city keep floating in, funny, disturbing, and increasingly mad. Now that sounds super bizarre, but so is the Department of Speculation, and I really enjoyed this. So, and I think one thing that's really interesting is she takes this kind of oddball approach to something from a sideways angle, so you don't even really know what you're in for. In this case, it's probably a little more overt because, you know, the podcast is about weather, and the book is named Weather. So, but I feel like just that sense of if you can save others, then if you can't save others, then what or who might save you? I think that's fascinating, and I'm willing to bet that's going to be a big point of this book, and I'm looking forward to reading it. Next is another one I think I've heard of, but the UK cover is different. I'm just going to double check on that. Yes, the UK cover is very different from the American one, so I have heard of this book. It's The Most Fun We Ever Had by Claire Lombardo. At a family wedding, the four Sorensen sisters polka dot the green lawn in their summer pastels with varying shades of hair and varying degrees of unease. Their long infatuated parents watch on with a combination of love and concern. 16 years later, the already messy lives of the sisters are thrown into turmoil by the unexpected reappearance of a teenage boy given up for adoption years earlier, and the rich and varied tapestry of the Sorensens' past is revealed. Weaving between past and present, The Most Fun We Ever Had portrays the delights and difficulties of family life and the endlessly complex mixture of affection and abhorrence we feel for those closest to us. A dazzlingly accomplished debut and an utterly immersive portrait of one family's becoming, it marks the arrival of a major new literary voice. Now, if you know me, you know I love a book about a complicated family. I love a book about a complicated family. But this book has never... I've run into it a couple of times over the past year, since it was released, however long that has been. And it has never appealed to me enough to seek it out or pick it up. It could be done well. This is another one I might pay attention to some of the feedback from other people who have read it, but to me, it sounds very familiar, almost achingly familiar, like something I've read before. So I would pay attention to the feedback from other people who have read it, people who are actually planning to, say, read the entire long list, like Simon Savage, possibly Eric Carl Anderson. I haven't watched either of their videos yet because I wanted to do my own first and not be not be influenced by what they say. But this is one I would be curious to check out other opinions on before committing either way, but I'm inclined to pass. Next is a title I have, Dominicana by Angie Cruz. I am excited about this one. I just have not had the time to get to it. If you follow along at all, you know that I am terrible at following through on TBRs, but this is a book I've been wanting to read since it was released and I just haven't gotten around to yet. So in this one, 15-year-old Ana Cancion never dreamed of moving to America the way the girls she grew up with in the Dominican countryside did. But when Juan Ruiz proposes and promises to take her to New York City, she must say yes. It doesn't matter that he is twice her age, that there is no love between them. Their marriage is an opportunity for her entire close-knit family to eventually immigrate. So on New Year's Day, 1965, Ana leaves behind everything she knows and becomes Ana Ruiz, a wife confined to a cold, 6th-floor walk-up in Washington Heights. Lonely and miserable, Ana hatches a reckless plan to escape. But at the bus terminal, she is stopped by Cesar, Juan's free-spirited younger brother, who convinces her to stay. As the Dominican Republic slides into political turmoil, Juan returns to protect his family assets, leaving Cesar to take care of Ana. Suddenly, Ana is free to take English lessons at a local church, lie on the beach at Coney Island, dance with Cesar at the Audubon Ballroom, and imagine the possibility of a different kind of life in America. But when Juan returns, Ana must decide once again between her heart and her duty to her family. In bright musical prose that reflects the energy of New York City, Dominicana is a vital portrait of the immigrant experience and the timeless coming-of-age story of a young woman finding her voice in the world. I mean, I am sold. The immigrant experience, the fact that it's in New York City, even set in the past, I lived in a 6th-floor walk-up in Harlem, not Washington Heights. But so, and the coming-of-age story of a young woman finding her voice, I am on board for all of that. I've been looking forward to reading this, and I would definitely hope that it could potentially make the shortlist. Next is Girl by Edna O'Brien. This is a title I've kind of heard of. I've heard a lot about Edna O'Brien in particular, and I've never read any of her books, and I really need to get around to that at some point, because they always sound interesting. So let's see what this one is. Captured, abducted, and married into Boko Haram, the narrator of this story witnesses and suffers the horrors of a community of men governed by a brutal code of violence. Barely more than a girl herself, she must soon learn how to survive as a woman with a child of her own. Just as the world around her seems entirely consumed by madness, bound for hell, she is offered an escape of sorts, but only into another landscape of trials and terrors amidst the unforgiving wilds of northeastern Nigeria, through the forest and beyond, a place where her traumas are met with the blinkered judgment of a society in denial. How do we love in a world that has lost its moorings? How can we comprehend the barbarism of our enemies and learn forgiveness for the atrocities committed in the name of ideology? Edna O'Brien's new novel pierces to the heart of these questions, and the result is her masterpiece. I am sold. That question right there about comprehending the barbarism of our enemies, learning forgiveness, ideology. God. Okay. I need to check this one out too. So for sure, I need to finally get around to reading an Edna O'Brien book. Now we have Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Maggie O'Farrell is another author I'm familiar with, have never read, and really need to get around to reading at some point. So on a summer's day in 1596, a young girl in Stratford-upon-Avon takes to her bed with a fever. Her twin brother, Hamnet, searches everywhere for help. Why is nobody at home? Their mother, Agnes, is over a mile away in the garden where she grows medicinal herbs. Their father is working in London. Neither parent knows that one of the children will not survive the week. Ooh. Hamnet is a novel inspired by the son of a famous playwright. I'm getting Shakespeare. It is the story of a bond between twins and of a marriage pushed to the brink by grief. It is also the story of a kestrel and its mistress, flea that boards a ship in Alexandria, and a glovemaker's son who flouts convention in pursuit of a woman he loves. Above all, it is a tender and unforgettable reimagining of a boy whose life has been all but forgotten, but whose name was given to one of the most celebrated plays ever written. Again, Hamlet. That sounds really interesting. Some of the things at the end where it goes into like the other things, like the flea aboard a ship in Alexandria, sounds... I don't quite know what to think about that, but the book sounds fascinating. Obviously, Maggie O'Farrell is an author that I have been wanting to read for a really long time, and that sounds really interesting. So I'll be looking forward to that as well. Speaking of authors I'm familiar with and need to get around to reading, Jacqueline Woodson, Right at the Bone. Now, in this one, it's Brooklyn 2001. It is the evening of a 16-year-old Melody's coming-of-age ceremony in her grandparents' brownstone. Watched lovingly by her relatives and friends, making her entrance to the music of Prince, she wears a special custom-made dress, the very same dress that was sewn for a different wearer, Melody's mother, for a celebration that ultimately never took place. Unfurling the history of Melody's family from the 1921 Tulsa race massacre to post-9/11 New York, Right at the Bone explores sexual desire, identity, class, and the life-altering facts of parenthood as it looks at the ways in which young people must so often make fateful decisions about their lives before they have even begun to figure out who they are and what they want to be. Okay, now I have a problem because I have too many books that I want to add to my TBR because I really want to read that. That sounds amazing, really amazing. And I've wanted to read Jacqueline Woodson for a while, as I said. Oh, and that sounds really good. So now I'm gonna have to check that one out. I don't think it's a very long book, so yeah. I'm glad I'm not thinking that I'm gonna try to predict the shortlist because with all the books I really, really want to read, I feel like it would be difficult. But next we're getting to another one that I own. Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other, and again, you could tell that I really suck at TBRs because I have been wanting to read this book since it appeared on the long list for the Man Booker Prize and just failing to read it ever since, and I really want to. Obviously, this is the co-winner of the Booker Prize for last year, and from the feedback I've gotten, should have been the only winner. This is Britain as you've never seen it. This is Britain as it has never been told. From Newcastle to Cornwall, from the birth of the 20th century to the teens of the 21st, Girl, Woman, Other follows a cast of 12 characters on their personal journeys through this country in the last 100 years. They're each looking for something, a shared past, an unexpected future, a place to call home, somewhere to fit in, a lover, a missed mother, a lost father, even just a touch of hope. God, I want to read this book so much. I really need to get to it at some point this year. I will be, like I said, I know I don't want to speculate on what will make the shortlist, but I will be shocked if this does not make it to the shortlist. And a little disappointed, even though I haven't read it. Now we get to Fleishman is in Trouble by Taffy Brodesser-Akner. I discussed this book a lot when I talked about the long list and shortlist for the National Book Award last year, and it I immediately brushed it off because it's a kind of book that I have not been interested in reading for a while. But the feedback I got on it was that it's actually good. I'm still not super interested in reading it. If you want to know what it's about, finally free from his nightmare marriage, Toby Fleishman is ready for a life of online dating and weekend-only parental duties. But as he optimistically looks to a future that is wildly different from the one he imagined, his life turns upside down as his ex-wife, Rachel, suddenly disappears. While Toby tries to find out what happened, juggling work, kids, and his new app-assisted sexual popularity, his tidy narrative of a spurned husband is his sole consolation. But if he ever wants to really understand where Rachel went and what really happened to his marriage, he is going to have to consider that he might not have seen it all that clearly in the first place. So basically, it's a white dude who can't get his life together. And what I've heard is that he really has to grapple with a lot of things and the things that he has done and come to a reckoning about them. That still sounds very familiar to me and like something I have read and been disappointed with in the past. So I just still think that's a pass. And then we get to one I'm really looking forward to because it's not even released yet. It's this is not a copy of the book, but it's Hilary Mantel. The new book is The Mirror and the Light. I just wanted to hold this up because I love this book. I like Wolf Hall. Wolf Hall is really, really dense. I feel like I should reread it at some point, but I know it's a book you need to engage with. It's very good, but very dense. I really enjoyed Bring Up the Bodies, particularly because it feels a lot more focused. Like Wolf Hall covers a lot of ground. It covers a lot of Thomas Cromwell's early life into him beginning to work for and earn the trust of King Henry VIII. Bring Up the Bodies very specifically just deals with Anne Boleyn and that single chapter. And I think in doing that, it does it so well that I can't help but just love it, even more than Wolf Hall. The Mirror and the Light is another really long book, very sprawling, covers a little bit more time, but I'm very much looking forward to it still, and I will be shocked if I don't like it. So England made in 1536. Anne Boleyn is dead, decapitated in the space of a heartbeat by a hired French executioner. As her remains are bundled into oblivion, Thomas Cromwell breakfasts with the victors. The blacksmith's son from Putney emerges from the spring's bloodbath to continue his climb to power and wealth, while his formidable master, Henry VIII, settles to short-lived happiness with his third queen, Jane Seymour. So basically, we pick up right where Bring Up the Bodies left off. Cromwell is a man with only his wits to rely on. He has no great family to back him, no private army. Despite a rebellion at home, traitors plotting abroad, and the threat of invasion testing Henry's regime to breaking point, Cromwell's robust imagination sees a new country in the mirror of the future. But can a nation or a person shed the past like a skin? Do the dead continually unbury themselves? What will you do, the Spanish ambassador asks Cromwell, when the king turns on you, as sooner or later he turns on everyone close to him? With The Mirror and the Light, Hilary Mantel brings to a triumphant close the trilogy she began with Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies. She traces the final years of Thomas Cromwell, the boy from nowhere who climbs to the heights of power, offering a defining portrait of predator and prey, a ferocious contest between present and past, between royal will and a common man's vision of a modern nation making itself through conflict, passion, and courage. I am so looking forward to this book. I will not be getting to it in the month of March because I'm tackling a different book for March of the Mammoths, in which you read a book larger than 800 pages. And I have some BookTube Prize books to wrap up for the month so I can get my vote in. And then I have 2 buddy reads coming up in April. So I'm not going to be reading this book as it is released, but I'm really looking forward to it. And hopefully it's not going to turn into something like Girl, Woman, Other, where in about a year I'm still talking about how much I want to read it, which would totally be a me thing to do. And then there's Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. I have heard of this book. I've not actually seen too much feedback about it on BookTube. So I'll be curious to see how people respond to it as they discover the long list. Meet Queenie. She just can't cut a break. Well, apart from one from her long-term boyfriend, Tom. That is a sentence right there. That's just a break, though. Definitely not a break up. Stuck between a boss who doesn't seem to see her, a family who doesn't seem to listen. If it's not Jesus or water rates, they're not interested. And trying to fit in 2 worlds that don't really understand her, it's no wonder she's struggling. She was named to be queen of everything. So why is she finding it so hard to rule her own life? This is a book I would be interested in reading. Oddly, I was kind of waiting for feedback and I haven't heard a lot. So I'm hoping that the fact that it appears here on this long list, I'll start hearing some things about what people have thought of it, because it sounded interesting to me. And I'd be interested to see how it does. And finally, we have 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. I've never heard of this book, never heard of this author. So here we go. In 1,000 Ships, broadcaster and classicist Natalie Haynes retells the story of the Trojan War from an all-female perspective. For fans of Madeline Miller and Pat Barker, that's immediately where my head went. Didn't Pat Barker basically just do this? This was never the story of one woman or two. It was the story of all of them. In the middle of the night, Cruz, I don't know how to pronounce these names, wakes to find her beloved Troy engulfed in flames. 10 seemingly endless years of brutal conflict between the Greeks and the Trojans are over, and the Greeks are victorious. Over the next few hours, the only life she has ever known will turn to ash. The devastating consequences of the fall of Troy stretch from Mount Olympus to Mount Ida, from the citadel of Troy to the distant Greek islands, and across oceans and sky in between. These are the stories of the women embroiled in that legendary war and its terrible aftermath, as well as the feud and the fatal decisions that started it all. Powerfully told from an all-female perspective, 1,000 Ships gives voices to the women, girls, and goddesses who for so long have been silent. It does sound startlingly similar to Pat Barker's book from last year, which was what, The Silence of the Girls, or something like that. Although I think in that one there was at least one male voice, so it's interesting that this one takes the perspective of just focusing on the women. I don't know. It's a little surprising that it sounds that familiar to something that was just shortlisted for a lot of prizes as well. So I don't know about that. This is another one I'm going to be interested in seeing what other people think of it. So just running back through the titles really quickly, How We Disappeared, I'm very interested in. Weather by Jenny Offill. Dominicana, Edna O'Brien, Hamnet, Red at the Bone, Girl, Woman, Other. Room for a lot of upsets. I know there were people who were disappointed by this list. It sounds really strong to me. There are a lot of books on here that I'm interested in. So, wow. And I would love to hear which ones you are interested in, which ones you would just immediately take a pass on. And if you disagree with me about, say, Ann Patchett or any of that, let me know. You know where the comment section is. It's down there. And yeah, just let me know what you think about this prize in general and this long list. Let me know if there are things other than Duck's new report that you would have liked to have seen on the long list. And I look forward to all of that. Thank you for your time. This turned into a long video. So if you've made it this far, thank you. And I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.